Gary Lineker is, of course, back in trouble because apparently MPs are now saying he should be silenced before the election, which I think is a bit of a step too far, actually. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Gary Lineker spouting off, and I don't think he should do it. But I don't think the MPs should be calling him for him to be silenced.
I mean, they do raise an interesting point. It's the election part is a little pointless. Fans of Gary Lineker are going to be his fans regardless. But he can't keep getting away with it, really.
No.
It's not fair on every... Like, the 20-year-old interns that work at the BBC who aren't allowed to tweet anything.
Right.
Yeah. It's not exactly sending the right message. Why is no one else allowed to do it apart from Gary Lineker? Right. It's weird.
Well, they got rid of Carol Vorderman, you know, and presumably because she's not worth as much to them as he is, because she was being quite vitriolic about the Tories. He's a little subtler than she is, I must say. But yeah, I mean, I just think he's bringing the BBC down with him. He's dragging them all sort of into the gutter, isn't he?
He's just got too much power there, you know. They organise a walkout if he's under threat. I don't think any MPs have actually called him specifically to be silenced, and that does sound rather sinister if you put it that way.
Well, they're saying he should be silenced before the election. They are saying he shouldn't be allowed to tweet.
He is breaking the rules, although the rules kind of change in regards to Gary Lineker, don't they?
Yeah, they do. That's the trouble. I mean, every time he's in trouble, they find a reason not to punish him. You know, because last time it was like, oh, well, it's all right because it was an open letter that he wrote. It wasn't social media. And then when he went on social media, they kind of went, well, you know, it's OK. We think it's all right. It's probably just about, you know. And then Samir Shah said he'd broken the rules. But, you know.
The thing about Gary Lineker is that he does make the BBC look really bad. And there are lots of people who diligently work at the BBC and they're very angry because they have to abide by these rules, and he's bringing them all into disrepute and so forth, so on and so forth. But I think for MPs to get involved, I mean, basically, Gary Lineker is just a bit lame. You know, he kind of jumps on every bandwagon in a not very intelligent way.
No.
And actually, I think if you start getting into the kind of slightly sort of reactionary, get him off my screens, it just kind of gives him more importance than he deserves, perhaps.
Well, exactly right.
He's very well paid, isn't he? Now, I don't watch his shows, I'm not really into football, so I'm not the right person to comment on whether he gives value for money. But there was there was a calculator.
Take your word for it.
You could work out how much value you get for paying your BBC tax. It was in the Telegraph, actually, your paper, Madeline. And out of the £169 licence fee, I get £15 worth of value based on the amount of BBC that I consume.
Yes.
But, you know, I'm still having to pay for his salary. And, of course, lots of shows are being axed or being threatened with being axed because of the licence fee. Why not get rid of some of the most expensive presenters?
Well, that's
rather than axe shows.
One of the most recent things to be closed down is a question of sport, which you're all probably too young to remember when it used to be good.
But
when it was
with like Ali McCoy.
Yeah,
I remember that.
There were several incarnations of it which were quite funny.
I loved it when it was good in the noughties, I remember.
Yeah, and when it was around, I think it started probably long before, 2 decades before that. But I mean, they did the dreaded kind of getting rid of Sue Barker because she was an older woman. They clearly thought this is the wrong demographic. We better get some younger people in, which is what they do on every television show.
They do it all
and every time they do it, it just dies a death because people don't want to watch, you know, people like that.
Well, the trouble is that they've got this idea there's a kind of fabled, mythical El Dorado of all these young people who are going to start watching the BBC, even though young people consume all media in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And the BBC seems to be, like, allergic to Dancing with the One That Brung You, you know, the people that watch and listen to it every day. It's sort of often almost feels like it's trying to alienate that audience deliberately.
Well, that's right. It's the wokists that do it. I mean, it's like Doctor Who has now gone so ridiculously crazy and, you know, in one direction about, you know, is Doctor Who gay? Is Doctor Who a woman? Is he a man? Is he, you know, some kind of mixed pronoun? Nobody cares. It's Doctor Who. Just do it as a, you know, science fiction show.
Well, I don't care. I just wish I didn't have to pay for it. That's the annoying thing. I think it really needs to streamline its output and its expensive presenters.
Yeah. Well, I just think it needs to go back to its first principles, you know, Reithy and stuff, that there used to be such... I think I still have this kind of abiding affection for the BBC because I compare it to the BBC that I grew up with rather than the one it currently is, because I don't even watch it very often nowadays. But I think of the great documentaries I watched growing up. I learned so much about history.
All of that's gone,
all that stuff. If you watch a documentary now, it usually has some kind of very obvious political agenda and it's dumbing down and not treating its audience with respect.
And that's the thing. I mean, Joey Barton, who was in the news last week having a go at various, you know, appointment of women to do football shows that he doesn't think. He says he thinks Football Focus is going to be next because he just thinks it's dreadful. because it's now very much more focused on women's football than it was on men's. I mean, I was listening to somebody complaining about it the other day. They didn't do the Scottish Cup final because, you know, they only had time to do women's football. And you just kind of go, well, why, if you really want to do women's football, why can't you just do both? Why do you have to put one in instead of, you know, knocking something else out? And it just is... the only problem for me with the BBC now is we only ever talk about things that have gone wrong.
Yeah.
You hardly ever go, oh, there's a great new series on the BBC. Yeah. I mean, the new one that's out, Vigil, is it? You know, they've got these two... I happened to notice it was on last night. Peter Hitchens wrote about it. Oh. And it's the new sort of TV cop drama. But, of course, the two women detectives in it are lesbians. And you go, OK... It wouldn't normally matter, except for the fact that somebody's done that deliberately.
It's the constant shoehorning.
You know, it's just a sort of constant,
It's constant shoehorning. And, of course, you know, we know it's deliberate. You know, I've talked before in your show, Mike, about the Nudge Unit reports, where they talk about using television for social engineering. It's not a new thing. It's just, it's very unsubtle, very clunky. People can see through it. They're bored of it. You know, it's like the same with the soap operas as well. You know, there's no better way to wash your brain than watching EastEnders these days.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm always reminded by Kevin O'Sullivan about when they had the European night in Walford Square or whatever it's called, you know.
Oh, really?
In EastEnders.
Did they?
Yeah,
No.
they had a Euro night.
No.
And this was like around the time of the Brexit referendum. Because I mean, I haven't watched EastEnders for probably a decade.
Isn't it Albert Square?
Albert Square, sorry. It's the name of the town is Walford. Or something,
yeah.
It's about, Albert Square, and they had sort of European flags flying in the pub and all this. And people were going, sorry, what are you doing? You know, even if it was a genuine sort of East End...
Cockney East End behaviour.
Cockney East End behaviour. I love a bit of Euro. I love going over to Brussels.
I'll take down my West Ham flags and put the EU.
Conversations about the vaccine during COVID were the most awkward, weird bits of script writing about, oh, are you going to have it and be a superhero? Yes, are you going... It was just...
It was weird. It was icky.
Yeah. It's very sort of glorious leader, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a bit sort of
Well,
Stalin-ish.
I'm glad you brought me to that because she's saying it's wasteful that we're spending all this money on diversity. Well, it's her government's money that's doing it, isn't it? I mean, this idea that Esther McVeigh's the sort of common sense minister and she's the only one who suddenly worked out that we've been under the same government for 13 years and it's all been going horribly wrong. I mean, what is going on?
Yeah, it was a bit hilarious that that's happened. But is she still doing DB News?
Well, she had to, I think, not anymore. I actually think they've kind of done a bit of a number on Esther McVeigh because some of what she's looking at, public sector waste is really important.
It is so important.
Policing is really important.
Yeah.
Questions about two-tier policing. There's loads of really kind of awful, divisive DEI stuff that goes on in Whitehall and, you know, large sums of money being given to organisations like Stonewall. This is all really important. So why did they have to give her such a silly title that's just so easily mockable?
That's the problem, is it was just so easy mockable. But she almost did name herself that. She was, and there's the Common Sense group, the Tory
They
group.
all nicked it from me, you know, because I was home with Common Sense before any of them and thought of it, you know.
You patented it.
I mean, I haven't received any money for it or anything. But no, I mean, the thing is that surely if they'd wanted to get rid of all of that ridiculousness and the crazy woke brigade diversity instructions, they could have just
made us civil service minister.
They should have just said, this is now what we're doing. All of this is going, every single department, from the Home Office to the Foreign Office to, you know, the Department of Defence and Health and everything else. All of this is gone. None of it is any more part of the network. And that's, you don't appoint one person, because she now gets all the flack for sort of, you know, she'll be anti-trans next, she'll be chased down the road by people, you know, all of that stuff will happen to her.
I think she's brave in a way to take this portfolio on because so far, you know, no minister really manages to fight the blob effectively. And, you know, that's the whole civil service, which is so woke, it's untrue. You know, the Competition and Markets Authority,
when did all this happen?
Spend 10% of their time on equality, diversion,
diversity.
Gold diversity, inclusivity. And, you know, it's linked to bonuses. It's just, it's completely sedimented throughout.
But can anyone remember when did it start?
Well, the thing is, I would say, I think there are some really, really brilliant civil servants who work incredibly hard, but it's very difficult in the civil service for anyone to get sacked ever. So what you end up with is maybe like half the workforce doing all the work, and then there are lots of people who are, you know, not pulling their weight. And it's harder than it would be in the private sector to, you know, maybe... Of course, that's not to say that there aren't slackers and wasteful HR types in the private sector. Obviously, there are tons of those, but I guess the difference is we're not forced to pay for them.
I don't think many of them work for
pensions.
Michelle Moan's company.
Yeah.
I don't think she's got too much diversity and inclusion going on.
But honestly, not all civil servants.
But it doesn't. I mean, I'm sorry to keep saying this. Old enough to remember when the civil service was kind of bad for different reasons. It was too conservative. It was full of blokes. It was full of people who didn't want to do very much to change the way that we are. But it's suddenly now completely reversed and has now become this radical kind of outspoken organisation of people who won't do what they're told and who are following Stonewall.
I've always thought about this, and I think it's because they had to... All government policy that may be about these kind of social issues had to be demonstrated, and they used the civil service to lead by example.
Yeah.
And in my time working in politics quite directly at times, I have kind of seen it happen where people, have friends that are in the civil service and they'd be talking about things that just didn't really matter. That they'd have these afternoons, that they did come and take these classes and it didn't really matter. And then they'd all be saying how busy they were and how they were expected to do more work. And they kind of, like some people, if they were part of certain diverse groups, were allowed to have afternoons where they just kind of met as a part of those diverse groups, and someone was complaining because they didn't have a diverse group. And it just seemed very pointless.
Right.
Pointless.
I bet they were all celebrating International Migrants' Day, which is apparently today. And I was wondering whether there would be one for people who weren't migrants. I don't know what you call them. What do you call people who are not migrants?
People that like staying put.
People that don't like moving about much Day. I mean, you know, it's why have they got International Migrants' Day? But about half the Home Office will have taken the day off to go,
They have an EDI calendar in the civil service that marks all these days. They live by it.
But, you know, this
I have
is
to get my hands on one.
These termites have also done pretty well across the private sector and across all kinds of countries.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of the private
language.
sector is even worse, isn't it? I mean, look what happened at NatWest, look what happens
But actually, interestingly, quite a lot of these departments have been scaled back. It's happening even more in the States because I think a lot of companies leapt on this as a sort of woke washing, but people have become more cynical. And also, if you're losing money, that's the first department that you cut back because it's not adding value to the company. So there has been a bit of pruning of this. I hope to see more of it in this country.
Yeah, but I mean, again, with the Stonewall business, if you're higher up the Stonewall kind of ladder of fame, because you do more of it, you get more points and you get better business and all of that. With the question of sport being asked, we asked, Football Focus a week next to go, do you feel sport and politics have become too intertwined? IP says, once you watch a match, why do you need to hear other people's opinions? Isn't your own opinion enough?
I agree.
Well,
I'd have to watch a match first to let you know.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
sure.
And then obviously we wouldn't want your opinion on it because we just want our own opinion.
I need someone's commentary. It's either the TV or it's like my uncle who's a season ticket holder of Aston Villa. Otherwise, I won't know what's going on. You know.
No, absolutely right. Well.